Jake Paul started Team 10, and I think there's a lot of hype around that. And he proved out that you can build audience, you can build creators.
Hello and welcome to Starting Small. My name is Cameron Nagle, and what you're about to hear is a resilient story to an entrepreneur's journey over the brand that we know and consume today. At Starting Small, I believe that everyone has a story to tell under one philosophy. Everyone starts small. Even these founders have once started where you are, in their parents' kitchen, basement, out of a wagon, and many more. At Starting Small, we discuss the strategies used, the obstacles overcome, and the successes of an entrepreneur's journey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Starting Small, and make sure to leave a review to let us know how you enjoyed it. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Max Levine of AMP Studios. Max, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thanks for having me, Cameron.
Of course. So I'd like to start out with your upbringing. What would you say your childhood was like, and where did you grow up?
Yeah. So I guess I had a pretty chill upbringing. So I'm from a very small town in New Jersey. It's called Margate. It's right next to Atlantic City. I think 6,000 people live there year round. So it's a very small beach town, and it's very seasonal. And, you know, in the summer, we would call them shoobies, would invade the town, and, you know, they have summer homes and all that. And the population would like 3-4x in the summer. So I don't know, like I just grew up in a very small town, and, you know, my dad and grandfather, they were very entrepreneurial. They had small businesses, dry cleaners, and, you know, they had 2 dry cleaners and laundromats, and they had the shopping centers that, you know, those, I guess, stores or locations resided in. So yeah, like I was always around, that business type of environment as a kid. However, just like working there, it wasn't super fun. So I knew from an early stage that I didn't want that to be like my main focus as I grew up. But you know, I grew up in a, you know, small town, and it was a interesting and unique upbringing, and, you know, I had a great time, and it was just cool, like just being around like my grandparents. Like my grandmother, she was a Holocaust survivor. So just kind of being around her and just like how she approached life. Like obviously there's positives and negatives that come with that, but I think it just kind of made me appreciate things a little bit more, and just like instilled a work ethic. And that really anything you can achieve if you really put your mind to it. So, you know, I'm grateful to at least like have grown up around my grandmother and my grandfather, and just to have, you know, parents and, you know, a sister who, you know, were just like always there and, you know, supportive. So yeah, that's kind of high level on my childhood, at least.
For sure. So you mentioned your family's ventures with the laundromats. You didn't really enjoy it. Did you have an entrepreneurial mindset? What were your interests, sports, activities, clubs, etc. growing up?
Yeah. I think my family just generally super active. My dad always played basketball. My mom was a fitness instructor. My sister, she was an incredible athlete, more athletic than me. And she got a scholarship, and she rowed and won a few national championships rowing at UVA. And, you know, I would play baseball and basketball and football and like a lot of the guy sports. And then in high school, I played, you know, I rowed, sorry. So yeah, like, I guess that's kind of what we were up to in terms of being entrepreneurial. Like I knew I was always interested in that, but I don't know, like I think for me it kind of took until I was in college really like actually really get into it personally.
For sure. So I saw you went up and you ended up going to Rutgers University. If you can kind of share, what did you study there, and what were some of the aspirations for your career also following graduation?
Yeah. So I was in the business school. I think originally I was planning on doing finance. And I think for better or for worse, you really didn't get into your curriculum until a few semesters in. So like, I think like the first year was just like assimilating and taking all these like weird courses that like I have no way. Actually, like maybe intro to Microsoft Excel or like whatever that course is called. Like I use on a daily basis, but like besides that, wasn't really anything that actually contributed to like, I guess what I do now. But I just think in terms of the people that I met, you know, I still have friends that I'm in touch with, you know, constantly that I went to school with. And yeah, I was in the business school, originally finance, and then I kind of switched to marketing, and I started my first businesses when I was kind of like a freshman heading into sophomore year. And then I took a semester off, after my first semester of junior year, because I was technically a semester ahead. And that's when I started like my first like real company. And then I just didn't go back. So that's kind of
Yeah.
Like I kind of view Rutgers as a springboard, and I think a lot of it had to do with like the actual location because it was
Yeah.
close to New York, and I met a lot of really interesting people and built my network, and I think that more than anything was helpful.
Yeah.
Rutgers, it's an interesting school. Like I don't know, like I think the people there, or just like the progressiveness of the business school wasn't really there in terms of like entrepreneurial support and focus. I think it's a lot of people go there if they're in the business school to like do like finance or accounting.
For
But
sure.
yeah, I don't know. Like I think just the people I met there and just how close it was to New York, I think that was really beneficial.
For
So
sure. I'd love to talk about this time period where you start this new company, this venture. We talked earlier in the tech side.
yeah.
What did that look like? Especially being a student, you started it while you were in school. Then you took a semester off. You didn't go back. What did this period look like? What was the company exactly as well?
Yeah. So when I must have been a sophomore, or junior. I kind of forget at this point, but I was working at a marketing agency, and what we did was we did brand partnerships for Jimmy Kimmel Live and Reddit and Manny Pacquiao. So it'd be like pretty significant sponsorship deals. Like they'd bring in a brand to do a sponsorship with Jimmy Kimmel Live, and it was like a $500,000 deal. And
Wow.
there was a YouTube component to those, activations. So like if it was like Coca-Cola wanting to do a brand integration with Jimmy Kimmel Live, there's a YouTube component, and Jimmy Kimmel like pretty much like syndicate his content on his YouTube channel, right?
Yeah.
And I think I must have been studying for finals or something one day, and I was on Instagram back in 2013, like the late or the mid spring of 2013,
Yeah.
and I came across influencers. We know them now. Back then, I had no idea who these people were. And I was like, oh, like, who are these people? Like, they're not celebrities. They're not really like anyone that, should have a following. I kind of thought it was interesting,
Yeah.
especially because what we're doing at that agency, there's like, social media components to like these brand, campaigns
Yeah.
that we're running. So I started reaching out to a bunch of them. A lot of feedback was, hey, I'm doing it for fun, or I'm making $50 promoting some spammy app. And like a lot of these creators that I was talking to were like 2 or 3 years later were like some of the biggest creators on the internet. But
Wow.
like no one, including me, knew what would happen. And I started going to like the CEO of the agency that I was at, and even other agencies in New York City, being like, hey, like we should start bringing branded content opportunities to these creators.
Mhm.
No one really saw it. It would have been what is now known as an influencer marketing agency,
Yeah.
like I guess 9 years ago, but didn't really do that because there's really no support or infrastructure. So I was like, okay, like I'll just do it on my own. One of the creators I was talking to, his name was Brent Rivera.
Mm.
He was 15 years old at the time. He had a few 100,000 on Instagram, and he was, just doing it for fun.
Yeah.
And I kind of, I guess, got into the right time, built a relationship with him and his family, and then started managing him. This is back in like November 2013, I think we signed.
Yeah.
And Brent then took off on the app Vine. And he was one of the top 10 biggest creators in Vine before that kind of died out. So it's like him and the Paul brothers and, I'm trying to think of us, King Batch, like a lot of like the OG content creators. So
Yeah.
again, a lot of it was just like right time, right place, but also putting myself out there. Again, a lot of it is just like random, just to be completely honest. Like
Yeah.
it would have been impossible to predict like Brent would have 90 some odd million, 9 years later and still be, incredibly prominent in
For sure.
So again, that's kind of long winded in terms of how I got my start. But, I guess even when I was just getting into it, especially like on the creator side, I wasn't really interested in creating a management company. I just felt that was inherently not really scalable. Like it's a service-based business. You can't really build and own IP. So I was like, okay, like how do we build and own IP in this space? Like kind of having like a venture-backed business that would have scale.
Yeah.
A problem that we noticed was like a lot of these creators, or really anyone with an audience in social media, they were getting hundreds and thousands of comments, DMs, mentions on a daily basis of people wanting their attention to be able to interact with them.
Mhm.
But maybe the creator would respond to like one or two here or there. So
Yeah.
there's a problem because, they built these massive audiences that it's too hard for one person to kind of like manage. However, there's a massive demand, but, limited supply in terms of interacting with these people. So we built started a tech company. Originally it's called Shimmer, to make it easier for really these creators to interact with their audiences. And to be honest, like that was before a lot of these apps or really anything really started popping up in I guess what you now call the creator economy, or
Yeah.
sorry, creator economy. Now it's obviously a pretty hot space, but that was an interesting experience for me because, we eventually raised, several $1 million through VCs. I went through Techstars. I learned a lot about business, life, relationships, raising capital, what not to do, more
Yeah,
so than
for
what to
sure.
do. I don't think that's really helped me. But yeah, like long story short, I left that company in 2017, just because we're, struggling to get product market fit, especially
Yeah.
because, like just to be honest, you need tens of millions of dollars in the consumer tech space just to
Yeah.
even keep up with like shipping features and hiring engineers, and even just like incentivizing users or creators to like, come back to your platform. And
Yeah.
we just were balling on a budget, to be honest. So it wasn't really quite there. And yeah, like long story short, we pivoted. Now it's called Community. A lot of celebrities, or even like Joe Biden or Michelle Obama, Justin Bieber, they have numbers where you can text them, but that's the origin story for that company.
Wow.
But I left that company to start what I'm doing now. So I'll kind of pause there because that was a lot.
No, that's super impressive. And it sounds like you're truly one of the pioneers, like in the influencer, especially like management and growth space. 2013, it's such an early stage in the creator economy.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like watching this navigate, where was your mindset at this point? You have a successful venture here. You want to see what's going to be scalable now. Where did you want to shift? You shift into management, or you shift into
Yeah.
creating a pool of creators? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I think in mid 2017, we just, at least a tech company, I was managing Brent the entire time on the side, and Brent's business was flourishing. He was growing. And I was like, okay, like Brent is more successful as a person than this entire company.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I was viewing it. And like, also with that, like it's kind of a magnet just for opportunities as well. And there's a lot we can do with that if we kind of harness it in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I kind of viewed, okay, if we had to pivot the company, let's go more in a media company direction,
Hmm.
more so a creator driven media company. Like, how do we build a media company with Brent?
Yeah.
However, the issue was like the cap table was pretty diluted. There's like all these other people involved in the company. There's VCs, and it was probably just easier to like step aside and start clean, especially with Brent.
Yeah.
Just because I don't know, I think it would have been too complicated. So I think it was best for all parties to kind of like do their own thing. And I was kind of, it's probably taking a year or two to like really dabble into like what is next. But
Yeah.
Brent and I did start a business that kind of started off as a side venture initially. And this is back in, I'd say, late 2017. And we had the premise of, okay, Brent has an audience at the time around like 20, 25 million across social media.
Uh-huh.
Could we grow and develop content creators, I don't say through Brent, but like with Brent,
Yeah.
and leverage his audience expertise to really train them to be, successful and lasting, content creators. And at the time, we found our first creator who had like 5 or 10,000 on Instagram, brought him on board, and that became pretty successful. And then a year or two after doing that, we kind of went all in on that model because it was working. But yeah, that's kind of high level how it started. And again, kind of going back to that time period, Jake Paul started Team 10, and I think there's a lot of hype around that. And he proved out that you can build audience, you can build creators, but I think just like the lack of infrastructure and I don't know, just like building an actual like solid business, and especially being careful, like who's living together, like
For sure.
people not dating each other, like all that stuff, it kind of leads to a toxic culture that can like tear apart a company. So we kind of wanted to go about it from a direction of, okay, can we do this in a brand friendly manner, provide proper infrastructure, and see what can happen as a result. So
Yeah, that's a good example of referring to the Team 10. I'm curious, that's so crucial. Like if you bring on an influencer that they fit your ecosystem, what was that recruiting process look like? Like who were you looking for that would fit within your ecosystem?
Yeah, I think the process has really evolved and changed. Just in the beginning, it was pretty simple. It's like, okay, like, do they have a good look, or like, will they, be willing to put in time into this? Like, just like generic things like that, or like, do we like them?
Yeah.
And then I think over time, we've really, really honed in, and now it's kind of there's like a process we kind of have just to kind of make sure that if we're going to be investing in someone, it's it's worth their time. And obviously,
Yeah.
again, like you can't really control what happens after to a degree, but
Yeah.
it's just more of a balanced approach now versus just, going with our guts, I'd say. So.
Yeah, for sure. So something I'm sure that our audience is like really curious of, especially like creating a creator pool. Is there like a schedule, like what content creation that they're required to show up for because they are with your company? What does that look like? Like you're expected to be here these days, this times, etc.
Yeah. So really how our business is structured, I kind of view it as like, again, like a creator driven media company. So
Yeah.
all of these channels or creators, it's kind of like a TV network, but for, social media creators. So,
Yeah.
you know, they kind of rely on other people to be in their content, just like a cast does for a show, right?
Mhm.
Like you can't like show up and it just be you and you expect other people to be there. That wouldn't be good.
Yeah.
So each Monday we have a day that everyone just kind of comes together, film short form content. We kind of plan the week out. We check in with everyone, and that just helps us like set the foundation for the rest of the week. And then
Mhm.
after that, everyone kind of goes off in their own directions, and they each kind of have like their own mini production teams or creatives that kind of helps them plan out their content for that week, and
Mhm.
then they go about shooting it. And the expectation is like, hey, like make yourself available as best as you can to be in
Yeah.
other people's content, and then they will reciprocate that as a result. Obviously, we kind of have to balance it because you can't be, overbooked to a degree and,
Yeah.
not be able to like do what you need to do. But I think we have a really healthy balance and understanding of like the expectations, and it's really helpful for everyone. They
Yeah.
share insights, they share knowledge, they share audiences, and just like filming with more people who are like-minded and smart and you get along with, it just makes the content better. And it's just like, it's more fun versus a burden if you're just kind of doing everything on your own.
For
So.
sure. For sure. So I know AMP, the scale you guys are at today, I'm not sure if you take on like consistent sponsors, partnership deals, etc. What does that look like when you're vetting out sponsors? They're also sending applications to your creators. Do you say like you can only do this niche, you can only do this category? What does that look like? Sponsorship packages with specific creators?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on the platform.
Yeah.
All of our creators post weekly, YouTube videos, and like
Yeah.
they're very focused about like what that content has to be.
Yeah.
So like if we get an offer or a deal, even if it's like a decent amount of money, like it's really more so creative first, because if it's not integrated properly or if it's a dedicated video, it will completely affect the performance of the piece of content, and also
Yeah.
like potentially like their next few videos. So I think for us, we kind of view it as like, okay, like how do we properly integrate this?
Yeah.
So it's a win-win. Like we want it to like our content to do really well, but we also want this to be like really effective for our partner, making sure that we're, hitting their talking points or messaging properly, but also
Yeah.
like giving them what they want in terms of like views or conversions, whatever it may be. So it's very important that like it fits into like one, our schedule, two, the creative process, but also three, that we're actually delivering value for them, just so it's not like a cash grab.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm also curious, looking at your creators today, do you ever see conflict like within the creator hub that you own? And also how do you manage that if there is conflict resolved? Do you bring on more creators actively today? What does that look like?
Well, like I think really in any business, like I kind of view it as like HR, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's people in any business that you have, and like you need to make sure people are properly communicating, or like they're happy, that they know like you care about them.
For
And it's
sure.
the same with us. Like I view issues as built in. Like it's not like we're not going to have issues, because like any type of company has issues.
Yeah.
Tesla, Apple, Amazon, there's always going to be issues. I think it's just more so about like the mutual understanding and respect everyone has for each other, and then just being able to properly communicate that, and just like being adults. That's important. And that's why I think we're like very curated about like the types of people that we work with, because ultimately like we're all in this together, and we just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. But yeah, like obviously there's issues, but I think we try to like get ahead of them and mitigate it. So
For sure. I'm curious on your mindset, especially starting in 2013. You mentioned when Brett started in early days, you're not sure how much leverage he can carry through. How do you project to your creators that momentum, that what they're doing now can last 5 years, 10 years? Because I'm familiar with Amp World and some of your creators, and I mean, they've had amazing careers just in the past five 10 years.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. And it's also kind of hard to get like proper data on this industry
Yeah,
because a lot of it is really in the past like 10, 15 years, maybe like a few years before that. So
for
like,
sure.
yeah, like I think what I've learned is that 90 some odd percent of these influencers and creators don't really last more than a few years at a time, some even months at a time, right?
Yeah,
And even if they are lasting, it's like they have like a dead audience to a degree. So it's not really that valuable. So
yeah,
what's interesting just about like Brent is, and again, I'm not trying to like, obviously like I work with him, so I'm not trying to be too biased here, but
yeah,
he's been doing this for, I'd say properly like a decade, and he's the most relevant he's ever been right now.
yeah,
And I think if you kind of have the right people, the right mindset, and they're very data driven and analytical, they know how to like evolve and adapt. And I think
mm,
oftentimes a lot of creators, if they grow too quickly or they don't have the proper infrastructure around them or support system, or they get big a certain way, and then that feature or that like algorithmic hack gets taken away, they're kind of
yeah,
stuck, and we see it time and time again. And I think for us, it's just like training them to be like very data driven, analytical, to constantly adapt. And yeah, like one of our creators, Ben Azelart,
mhm.
he's 4.5 years in. He's hitting 170 million views per month on YouTube,
Wow.
and it's the biggest he's ever been right now. And he's just getting started, and
Yeah,
he's 20 years old. So like, it's not like he's going to retire right now,
yeah, yeah,
which is nice. But also, yeah, it just kind of like doing it for the right reasons and being intentional. And like that's why I think finding people who are so passionate about it is important, because I think if
yeah,
you're not passionate about it and you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you're not going to be as interested in trying new things or adapting. You're probably going to get burnout easier. And
mhm,
yeah, like even the best creators who are passionate about it get burnt out, but
yeah,
I think they're going to want to stay in the game and play the game longer because they're doing it for the right reasons.
for
So
sure. Well, yeah, this conversation has been very insightful. And what I've seen from just exterior of Amp World, especially, is that it's like such a tight knit family that I think they feel there's like relevance, that their community feels like related to them, the way
yeah.
they engage with the other creators in the hub and etc. Well, I'd like to conclude each episode with this. If you could share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along this
Yeah.
process, what would that be?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I have a few things. It's just like, I think just be intentional about like who you work with, whether it's, clients or, partners, whatever. I think that's just like so important. Just making sure that you're getting into business with people that you just like align with,
Yeah,
just like across the board. And two, I think just for young people starting out, and like this is kind of what I did, which helped me. It's just like kind of focus on a niche, especially something that like maybe isn't super hot or popular now, but like you kind of view it as a trend that could be a thing eventually. And
yeah,
that's kind of what I got into. And now the creator economy or influencer marketing, it's pretty massive now, but like I got into this 9 years ago, and like I did it not necessarily for the money, just because I thought it was interesting. And like, yeah, like there's obviously ways to like provide for yourself involved with that. But I kind of viewed it as an opportunity. And I think
sure.
oftentimes people kind of go towards like, what is the shining object at the moment? And it's very saturated. It's hard to like
Mm,
establish yourself, and there's a lot of competition. So,
yeah,
and there's also like a lot of like hype, especially now it's like the creator economy and like Web3 and NFTs. And like, I think people just like flood to things like simultaneously just
yeah,
because it's herd mentality. But really just like finding something that you kind of view as a niche and you can kind of grow with, and ideally be, I don't say a market leader after, time, but you can really grow with it. So
for sure. Well, Max, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out some more of Max's work at Amp World at ampstudios.co.
yes.